First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so glad to be here, and I have to compliment the host for the choice of snacks. I actually like these very much, and when you're going to present, it's a very good thing, because some people say that people who point with pipes, they are always right. So that's what I'm going to do through the presentation, right? And it's about how Sitecore platform supports mobile app solutions. This is how I look when I'm not cold. Sales engineer lead, I think, is the right word, and it's for the Nordics where we are now, and I have a little role in the Middle East as well about that. And I've actually been working with several positions in Sitecore. So what I'm going to talk about today is obviously based on some of the experience I had with these clients. The agenda looks something like this. I think most of you here know about Sitecore, but I'm going to start assuming that we don't know what Sitecore is, just to set the scene, and I'm maybe going to give a little different perspective on what Sitecore is, and how we can use it for connected experiences, because that's obviously the main title for this event today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the omnichannel thing, how a traditional CMS plays in versus a headless CMS. And then I'm going to introduce something called Sitecore Omni, and how you can use that for creating apps or mobile apps. And then I have a few references if we have time for this. The presentation today will be a little bit technical, but just a little bit. Because if you need to understand, for example, the concept of headless, you need to understand diagrams. So if there's non-technical people in the room that says, oh, I don't understand the diagrams, no stupid questions exist. Please ask them, right? The technical people, if you think it's too simplified and I'm exaggerating what you can do, please challenge me. I will point with the pipe. So, but let's go on. So what's in the box of Sitecore? We have like big diagrams of this. I tried to do the most simplified version I can of how to explain what's actually in the box of Sitecore here. If we see it like, can I actually point with that? No, I point with the pipe instead. If we consider this what we call the content hub, that's actually been rebranded after we made an acquisition. That's not on the agenda today. But if you see this, as this is where your content lives. The content you write, your text, your images, you might have a commerce catalog, a product information system, a DAM system for your assets, or the backend, you can call it. And then you have kind of some channels, which you can call the front end, which is going to present this content that you edit in the backend. So backend and front end. You could also refer to this as server side or client side, and there's a lot of schisms around this, right? So that's basically what Sitecore is about. And if we go back to when Sitecore was created, it was actually only these two areas here. This content management and the web, where you said, okay, now you don't need to code HTML anymore if you're on the website. We have invented something here. There was a lot of people saying that at the end of the 90s. I was one of them. A word-like tool, you can just write it and then it will be presented there. And then what Sitecore did right back then was they had a total separation of this. So content was totally separated from the presentation. And that has become a big benefit since then. And when we're talking headless, this is even more useful now today. But then over the time, of course, other backend system came in, the DAM and the PIM, which kind of all of them is kind of being orchestrated by the CMS system of how this content is presented through the different channels. And of course, other channels came in as well. Email, we have an email tool in Sitecore. And the question you ask, for example, can you get a follow-up if you don't open the email? That's maybe nurturing through marketing automation, and that's actually something we have in the system today. So Sitecore has really expanded to being more than just a web CMS, so you can call it a CMS or maybe even a Marcom platform today. But 5-6 years ago, I think it was, we introduced this layer here, which is the experience database, is the center of this. This is referred to as the XDB. This is a different database than is up here. This is the content database, where the content is stored. This is an analytics database. It collects behavior from the interactions from the channels. So let's give an example if we want to create a connected experience, for example. Someone comes to a website, they click a PDF. And then they leave. This is stored in the experience database. Next time they come back, we might say, was it a good PDF you read there? Here's another one. That's exaggerating it a bit, but that's a connected experience because we connect through 2 visits. We might also send an email to the one, if we have their email address that actually opened the mail, then we have a connected experiences across channel. So you can say this database here, this becomes the glue between the different visits and the different experiences for the customers. So the data becomes a glue. And this is quite unique for a CMS system. Now I know I'm selling it, but it's because Oliver is here, otherwise he will complain. But it is actually unique for a CMS system to have this kind of database here. Let me first show this, because this is, if you look into the XDB database, it actually looks like something like this. Some might say this is a CRM system. It's a contact card for a visitor, but it's not a CRM system. That would be something you enrich yourself about, what you know about your customers. This is actually enriched by the customers themselves, by their behavior. So it's stored actually on an individual level. This case here, it's Marie Smith. It might as well just say anonymous, and we know them by the cookie or some other identifier, but we can still kind of connect their experiences because of this data layer. So I would like to demo all day, so I prepared 1 minute demo just to show you an example of how it could be. Well, you just got nervous there. This is, it's called Habitat Home. It sells electronic devices. It's totally effective. What I have out here, we can see here, this is the data collection. This is only for demo purposes, but the XDB I just showed you, the database that collects the interactions, we can follow this here. For example, we can see this is our first visit. This is the first time we're here. We can also see that I'm anonymous, but we can see I'm using Chrome right now, which is wrong. It's actually Edge I'm using. It's working very well. And we can see some behavior and so on. I don't have time to go through all of it, but if we start clicking around, for example, reading what we have on the front page here, and we scroll down a little bit, see we have all kinds of call to actions, actually way too many. This is not especially good communication. Let's say we go into design your connected home and start to read about how to make a connected smart home. At some point it will come, here it is, and we get to a landing page and start reading about this. And then we are offered to say, why not get a month trial on our smart home software and try this out? Think, okay, we want to do that, so we sign up. We say, I'm Ole.net, for example. Sorry to everyone called Ole in the room. Sign me up. And then we give an email address. And this is where the fun starts to happen, right? Now we collect the name. Now people are going from being anonymous to actually being known. One thing we can also see is that now we have been profiled. This is what XDB helps us with. Based on the behavior we showed here, we have actually been saying, okay, we are interested in appliances and something about smart and connected. So based on our behavior, it's already starting to draw a profile about us here. But the most interesting part here is if I just refresh it, I think it will come. Yes, I was lucky. Is that now I triggered something called a goal here. In this current visit, it says I triggered the goal that I requested a trial software about this in an email. Let's say now we end the visit, so I'll end the cookies, close down the browser, and then I go home, I get my trial software and so on, and then I get back to the website at a later stage. Now this is the front page. Now it looks, basically everything below here looks totally different. And you might not do it that explicit, but this is to actually state a point here, that now because we were profiled in the last visit actually, as someone interested in appliances, we can see we still are that after leaving the website and coming back and closing down the session because we're being recognized here. And we have the next best action here. Instead of saying, So this is kind of an online inbound nurture flow, you can say, if we should talk a little bit about this. Instead of saying, okay, do you want to try our software? We said, do you need help with the installation, actually? You can ask for that. So always putting the next best action. And you say, now we have a connected experience, even though it's only through one web channel, but it's across visits, right? The reason, I'm going to go back to PowerPoint mode. The reason, not yet totally, the reason why I can do that is because I have a CMS system here, where I can, as I talked about, orchestrate my content. I can go in here and then I can see actually the banner here. Now I just need to catch it here. It's around. Let's take the one below, that's easier. You can see we have 4 versions of that. We have the content finder, the fitness, and then we have the one now, trial software requested. So I have I'm not going to show it to you now, I don't have time to that. But I have possibilities to take my content component, place them where I want, move them around, write the content, change it here, and I can also personalize it. I can change it based on the data I have available. I could actually A/B test it. I could do a lot of inbound marketing features with this content here. And that's because I have the CMS system here for this. But, that's of course very good. So if we should kind of sum up what Sitecore is based on what I talked, it's a lot more than what I showed today, but just if we should sum off of it. So we are partly a CMS. We also have some marketing capabilities. And we were actually originally a WCMS. The W stands for web, where it all started out. That was if you're only using a browser, right? And it's component-based, and presentation is 100% separated from content. But as you saw this experience I showed you here, this is only within one channel. It's on the web. And Sitecore is still like, since it was originally a web CMS, this is where the focus around creating solutions are still today. We also have a mail tool. We could, for example, have sent a mail to the one that actually requested software and so on. But the focus is very much around creating web. So when we're using the experience editor, the editor where we could use our components, it's for a web page we basically create. That's a preview we see, right? That's what the editors can do. And as I talked about the marketeers, well, they can personalize A/B test. There's automation tools, there's email messaging. We can actually do segmentation, and there's even analytics inside Core now. So all this is available, and this is something that's been developed over the years, coming from being a web CMS. So you can say today, or what should we say, 3-4 years ago, someone can correct me without I'm pointing the pipe, we started to see a lot of requests in Sitecore for, is Sitecore a headless CMS? We want a headless CMS. And the first time I myself thought, well, what the fuck is a headless CMS? I actually don't know. Versus a traditional, more web content management system. So what I'm going to use the rest of the presentation is to talk about this schema here, because that's important if you want to create, for example, mobile apps, or push your content to other channels. I actually just have to say that we actually support both approaches for this, because the separation of content actually does that Sitecore is also a headless CMS. Is there anyone that don't know what I mean when I'm saying headless? Yeah? Yeah. And it's very good to define, right, what it is. It's the new black within web development. Everything has to be headless. Oh, are you headless? And if you're not, then you're screwed, right? If you're trying to sell something. And it's considered as very pure, because I was talking about that there was this presentation layer, and then there was the backend layer. And when you do it, you have an API-only approach to web content management. That means that you develop the front-end part in the channels, in the tools you normally use. That could be something called React, for example, just to give an example. What front-end developers normally use. In a traditional CMS, you would develop everything within Sitecore and only push out HTML. So it's very often seen as very pure to do headless, because then the front-end developer can do whatever they want. And it's probably also part of the reason, as Danske Bank explained here, that they build stuff themselves. It's easier to use the tools you normally do. If you buy a big house like Sitecore, well, you would need to know every corner of that system, and it can take a long time, and it changes all the time. So you can say the development for the front-end part is actually decoupled from the backend, which is the CMS. So if I'm going back to the drawing I had in the beginning, saying we had this layer down here, the content layer where all your content is, like the backend, and then we have the front end, that's the channels here. This is what we want to connect, and there are several ways you can do this. The traditional Sitecore way I showed you here, then you have some layers here, you have something about your presentation. This was actually what I showed you here with the components you could create. You might have a personalization engine that can set up the rules for when should it change based on the data you know. There might be other rules as well as A/B testing, all the things we offer in Sitecore. This is taken through a rendering engine. This is what coders do. They render all this content and create a website for you guys. They do that in Sitecore, basically, so they need to know Sitecore and how to do this. And what comes out of this is HTML, basically what a browser reads. You can read it, you can use it in an app as well, but you might actually use other tools. So all the development is done from the backend. So you can see, if we call this the delivery part, this is handled by the backend and is handled by Sitecore. So it becomes a very closed circle, and you need to know Sitecore around this. And some might even argue that you can become vendor locked in by doing it this way. And it's made for the web mainly, as we saw. So what if you want to use your content in all the other channels you might need to communicate through? This is where the headless comes in. And Sitecore can do this as well. But in a headless system, you normally only actually have a backend. And then you serve, we have something called the Sitecore service client. But then you serve like pure content only. Text, maybe an image reference or something is served. And then the development is done up here outside Sitecore in normal JavaScript development, which the developers can use. So they can go directly down and pick up the content. And this is, of course, a very nice approach as well. But there are trade-offs and there are benefits of both. So if we're trying to compare them a little bit, one of the pros, of course, of having this is that you become channel independent. You can suddenly use your content in all channels because you develop it out there. So the front end is totally decoupled from the backend CMS. This is why this has become such a big thing today, right? We see a CMS called Contentful. This is actually only editing content and no more. They are very successful, especially in Finland, right? Where you are, Oliver. They can work in right now you can work in React Native, Angular, Vue, whatever you like to work in. And it's easier to find developers that can actually do that than it is to find Sitecore developers. So you get more freedom in that, which also leads to faster time to market, maybe. So less CMS vendor domain knowledge is needed. And some would say it's easier to maintain contextual and connected experience across channels because now you can go through all channels. But there's also trade-offs. Why? Right? It's harder to maintain contextual and connected experience through channels, right? It can actually be harder because you need to develop on different platforms now. Where if you want to do it through the same channel as we do with Sitecore, I would say it's easier to set up. So that's also what you should consider. Which channels are you utilizing the most and which approach would be the best here? It's not a black and white question. Front-end developer access pure content only. And that's actually as I see it, it's the biggest trade-off. It is that it's actually only the content. I just showed you personalization rules. I showed you editors can move components around. But you can't do that if it's only the content. The editors have no control of what they create. They just write a text, and it's up to the developer up in the front end to say how should this be presented. And what if it should be personalized? What if there's a personalization rule? Well, we don't know that because we're only getting content out. So both editors and marketers losing control with the content they create when you do the headless approach here. Back to here, all this layer here, all this that we use for creating this is bypassed in the headless way. And this is an important schisma which you need to think about when you do architecture. Which approach do you want to take here? You can still do the website through this way and then create your apps here, for example. But how about all your personalizations rules, all the A/B testing you set up? You kind of lose that, right? So this is where Sitecore is leading edge in technology. This is where we don't just lean back, right? Because this is what's happening in the market. So we created something that is branded as Sitecore Omni. I think the most two interesting things around this, which I'm going to talk about shortly here, is what we call the Sitecore JSS library, Javascript library, and the universal tracker. So what is JSS, first of all? Well, it is a front-end development kit where you can actually develop in React, React Native, Angular Vue, and more to come. So you can let the developers work like they do when you develop in a headless way, but you still have the capabilities that Sitecore offers around personalization and testing. If we can see how this is possible, we are going back a little bit here to our presentation about we have the front end, the back end, and the traditional CMS and the headless CMS. What Sitecore developed recently with version 9 is what is called the layout service. It's another middle layer in the delivery that goes in here on top of all these rules, all the presentation you do here. But instead of it being rendered as the normal traditional mode and pushing out HTML, it just shows something called JSON. JSON is a representation, it's actually text. It's what normal app developers use when they develop apps for content. But this JSON will have all the information about how should this be presented, what is the personalization rules, and so on. So the things that you actually configure down here will be represented in the layout service. But the development is still being done up here by the developers decoupled from the backend. But they're getting the info here. So you can say this is our take on how to actually do the hybrid thing between the traditional and the headless CMS way here. It's introducing the JSS library with the layout service. Does it make sense, or is it too technical? One is nodding. No, it's now I'm pointing with the pipe. The other thing you say, what about the XDB? Because we need to collect data, right? The traditional way it's being done down here on the server side, where it's collected. Still, if you go this way out, will you actually be able to collect any data? Because this is what glues the things together, as I mentioned in the beginning. So what is also part of this Sitecore is what we call the universal tracker. The point is that you can add that to basically any device, and it can feed the tracking down in the XDB database. So if you should add that, it would be up around here in the app development that you would add the universal tracker. So you still can collect the data and still create these connected experiences, but getting out into more channels and getting the benefit of the headless development. So this is the slide you always should have. What's in it for you? What's the benefits, right? It's all the headless benefits you normally have: decoupled architecture, developer freedom, faster time to market, but you still have some editing and layout control. You still have your marking capabilities available, and you can track to XDB via the universal tracker. It's not the most branded thing in Sitecore. There's a lot of things that has more focus if you look at our branding, but it has become one of the tools that are most in use of the new version 9, I think. We have, for example, Oriflame have created something where Oriflame needed to go to the Chinese market. And where are people on the Chinese market? They are on something that uses cosmetics. They are typically on something called WeChat. So you need to create an app for WeChat. And how do you do that with Sitecore? And how do you do that so you both can do the personalization and you can give the Oriflame editors and marketers control over what they do? They have used JSS actually for this already. It's an example. We also have Energy company in the Czech Republic have used it actually to create personal information about your usage in around the day, around your usage in your electricity. And there are a lot in the development. Cannondale is another interesting case around bicycles, where for men over 40 in tights, I guess it is, that want to improve their training and can collect everything through the app. They do that. So if you using Sitecore or wants to use Sitecore, and you also want to think about how to be more like channel and agnostic, is for sure something you should look into and look at the architecture a bit and decide on which approach do we actually take here. And that was it. Now I'm going to eat the pie. Thank you for having me.